This is AP Government Review for the Presidency. I will try to get it on YouTube. I know I got the first one on YouTube. I didn't get the second one on YouTube, but I will try my best to get the third one on. So thank you, all of you guys, for giving up your lunch for your betterment. I hope this is helpful. Hopefully I will not waste your time. I don't want to. So we only have a little over 20 minutes, so I have to condense 3 weeks into 20 minutes, and I'm more than happy to do so. I want to talk, first of all, about the actual test for tomorrow's exam here, okay? It is very similar in its structure and in its length to the other two exams. That being said, there are a few changes I want you guys to be aware of. Are we ready to get to it here? Okay, I really don't want to talk over people, so I'm not trying to be a jerk, but since everybody's kind of settled, I'll get going. Okay. First of all, there are only 75 questions. There's not 80. I know that seems small, but a few things you should be aware of, though. Number one, there are quite a few fill-in-the-blanks on this one. Probably, instead of having 3 or 4, there are more like 20. Right? So a few less multiple choice. Probably closer to 20 fill-in-the-blank. As I look at them, I've talked about every single one of them. They're not that hard, so don't freak out, please. So it's fill in the blank for about 20 of them. And at the end of the test, I just want you guys to be aware that, as I'm looking at it right now, there's something like 8 or 9 questions where I will give you the 4 different ways of changing the Electoral College that we talked about, and you have to match which one describes it. So I'll tell you right now, the options are A, National Popular Vote Initiative, B, the Maine model, C, the proportional or Colorado model, or D, the popular vote. And I have like 7 or 8 different options, and you have to tell me which one it applies to. So for instance, if I said like, this is also used by Nebraska, it would be the Maine model, right? If I said this one is simply looks at the popular vote and abolishes the Electoral College. That's just a popular vote. So make sure you don't know all of those different kinds of performing, because there are quite a few questions in the end about it. As far as big topics, it's pretty evenly distributed. I would say, as I was looking through the test, I really like the War Powers Act is a huge thing. So just make sure you know the War Powers Act. Make sure you have that down. Make sure you have the Electoral College down too. Lots of questions about the Electoral College. Lots of questions about the War Powers Act. There's questions about everything, but those kind of stuck out as I was looking at it before school today. So, you guys ready to begin? Okay, let's get to it. So, when we talk about the American presidency, we really have to begin with Federalist Paper number 70. Because Hamilton makes a distinction between monarchical executive power and Republican, small r, executive power. What he argues in Federalist Paper number 70 is that if you want good government, you want to have what in the executive? Energy, right? And energy in the executive is not a danger. It's a good thing if it's done in an orbit of checks and balances, right? Federalist Paper number 70 says a monarchical executive is dangerous because it writes the laws and enforces the law. It declares the war and wages the wars. It funds the government and raises the taxes, right? And so that's dangerous. What Hamilton says is that in a Republican scheme, it's not dangerous at all. And if you want the laws of Congress to be enforced and the programs implemented and the wars fought, you don't want that to be done with a kind of meek and mild and wimpy president. You want there to be energy, right? You want there to be energy and dispatch embodied in a unitary office. And that would be an energetic president. So Federalist Paper number 70 is really where you have to begin. And remember, the American presidency and the Constitutional Convention was very weak up until the last few days of the Constitutional Convention. The presidency was a very weak position, kind of what Thomas Jefferson called a second-rate Polish king. For most of the Constitutional Convention, who elected the president? The Congress. For most of the American presidency, for most of the convention, the president was going to have one term of how many years? 7 years, right? In the very end, you had the Electoral College come in, and you changed the duration of the president's office, so that now let's talk about those qualifications. Okay, so the president has to be 35 years old. Oldest president elected is Reagan. The youngest elected president is JFK. You also have to be a natural-born citizen. There's some disagreement about what that means. Does that mean just you have to be an American from birth? Or does that mean you actually have to be an American from birth and born in America? It's still not exactly clear. Most people agree, most scholars agree, just if you're an American from birth. Of course, that's given rise to certain questions about people like McCain or George Romney or even Ted Cruz. And it's also given rise to what movement that we had about show me your birth certificate. What's that called? The birther movement, exactly. So you have to be a natural-born citizen, 35 years of age. You have to have lived in the country for 14 years. And remember, the modern presidency is very different than the early presidency. In the early presidency, the stepping stone to the presidency was Secretary of State, right? Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, John Quincy Adams are all examples of the Secretary of State leading to the presidency. That's the stepping stone. Also, in the early presidency, it was not a popular office. And by that I mean the president was not expected to have to communicate with the public. Yeah, you had to be, in Federalist Paper, I think 69 or 64, it says that they do not want a person who is, quote, a transient meteor. They want a president who has been in public office, who has a record of accomplishment, who has done things. You don't have to be a great communicator because the president only does not what the people want, but what the Congress wants, right? So that's a kind of early presidency. Nowadays, what is the stepping stone to the presidency? Governors. Yeah, governors are really the number one stepping stone nowadays. And, what is not a stepping stone is the Congress, right? Of the 44 presidents, only 4 have come from the Congress. Okay? So make sure you guys know that stepping stone. Now, next qualification. You have to win the Electoral College. And I want to do a very thorough review here of the Electoral College. The Electoral College was created because of different problems that arose during the Constitutional Convention. One, why don't we let the people decide? We don't believe in direct democracy, and the country is spread out. We can never count the votes. Okay? Other thing is we don't want Congress deciding because that would ruin a system of checks and balances. So they came up in the very end of the convention with this idea of an Electoral College. And the Electoral College was, preserved federalism, gave power to the small states. It was Republican in nature, not Democratic. And so what they said was in the original Constitution, you are going to become president by getting a majority of the Electoral College vote. Now, how many votes does each state get in the Electoral College? You figure it out by adding the number of House members from a state plus your 2 senators, right? So the minimum number of votes, by the way, I'm covering stuff that is all over your test tomorrow. I mean, this is all in there. The minimum number of votes you could get from a state would be 3, right? Because you have to have 1 congressional district plus 2 senators. And in the original Constitution, each elector got 2 votes. They'd get 1 piece of paper, right, 1, and they'd write down 2 names. Then they would count up the votes, and first place became president, and second place became vice president. Okay, now, that all changed with the election of 1800. Because with the election of 1800, you now have political parties, and all the Democratic Republicans write down the same 2 names, right? And so you have a tie between Burr and Jefferson. They each get 73 votes, and this creates a problem. In our Constitution, if you get a tie, or you don't get a majority, who decides the election? It's not good enough to say Congress. The House of Representatives gets to vote on a state-by-state basis, right? And in the election of 1800, I think you had 18 states by 1800, and they were tying at 9-9, right? 9-all. What if you get 9-all? What if the states tie? What do? You keep revoting, right? And you got 36 rounds of voting in 1800 before they finally elected Jefferson as the president. So that is the election of 1800. And by the way, who elects the vice president? If there's the Senate, yeah, on a 1-by-1 basis gets to elect the Senate. Okay.
Do we have to know if there's the thing about Hamilton telling them to?
No, that's minutia. Yeah. So you got the 12th Amendment, and what did the 12th Amendment do? Well, the 12th Amendment said each elector still gets 2 votes, but now you're going to vote for the president on 1 ballot and the vice president on a different one, right? So that is how the Electoral College changed. Now, what is the relationship between the people voting and the Electoral College? Well, here's the way it works nowadays. On Election Day, in the first Tuesday of November, we do not have a presidential election. We have 51 state elections. And what's happening on that Tuesday in November is each state votes, but they're not really voting for a person, they're voting for a group of electors. Now, Obama won California. What that meant was that when the Electoral College actually does meet, even though they never actually meet, when their votes get counted, what is the day of the year when we count their votes? January 6th. Who actually counts the votes? Who's vote? The vice president. All we decided in November was which party gets to vote in the Electoral College. You guys get that? So in November, we're not voting for Obama or McCain or Obama and Romney. We're voting for which party gets to cast the votes. So Obama won, so we sent 55 Democrats to cast votes in the Electoral College. Texas, Romney won, so a bunch of Republicans get to do it. Now, 48 out of 50 states have what part of the Electoral College? It is winner take all. And that leads me to the big criticism of the Electoral College, which is, there are quite a few. One, it's anti-democratic. Two, you could have a winner of the popular vote who loses the Electoral College. 1824, 1876, 2000. The loser of the Electoral College got more popular votes. That offends people. And you also have this phenomenon called the faithless elector, which is where your state told you how to vote, but you did something different. Yeah, that is a faithless elector, which that could change the election as well. So a lot of people don't like the Electoral College. So there are all these possible reforms that I'm going to test you on, right? The most popular one... The most popular one is the idea of just abolishing the Electoral College and having a straight popular vote. Okay? Most people like that. Hillary Clinton likes that. The objection to that, of course, is that we would just become a big city election. It would destroy the two-party system. But that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is keeping the Electoral College. Then you have these three other ideas. And they all keep the Electoral College but change it a little bit. The Maine and Nebraska models say, okay, let's give one electoral vote for every congressional district in the state that is one. Right? So Obama would have won, let's say he wins 33 congressional districts in California. Romney wins 20. Who gets the 2 Senate votes? Yeah, whoever wins the popular vote within the state. Exactly. So, can't believe you are eating Jake's chocolate cake in front of me when I have not eaten today at all. Oh my goodness. Wow. I want it on the record. Morgan and Lauren are both doing this. No, that's okay. That's fine. Because someday when I'm dying in a desert and I have no water and you find me and you sit there and you sip water in front of me, that's fine. That's fine. Be the same thing. That's fine. That's fine. Didn't I give you Krispy Kreme? No. Whatever, anyhow. Okay, so it's your time, my fault, sorry. So, you have these three ways of changing it, where you keep the Electoral College, but you try and make it more, you get rid of the winner-take-all part of it. So, you have the Maine and Nebraska way, which I like. Then you have what Colorado almost did in 2004, where they were just going to take the popular vote and translate it into the Electoral College. Yeah, it's what we call the kind of proportional system. If you get 60% of the popular vote, you get 60% of the Electoral College, right? That's kind of Colorado way. And then, what is the cutting-edge, newest way of doing it? The National Popular Vote Initiative. I'll wait for you guys to quiet down here. A lot of chatting. In that way of doing it, what you would do is, you would keep the Electoral College, but you ensure that the popular vote winner always wins. Because what you would do is, the state would say, okay, I don't care how my state votes. I'm going to cast electoral votes from my state for the person who wins the popular vote nationally. So let's say in the last election, who got the most votes in the nation? Obama. Who won Texas? Romney. But if Texas signs up for the National Popular Vote Initiative, they would have to send 37 electors to vote for Obama, because Obama won the popular vote. Now, what's interesting about that is, you don't need all 50 states for it to work. You only need the biggest 11, or enough states that add up to 270. Yeah, by the way, how many votes do you need to win in the Electoral College? 270. You got to win a majority of the 538, and that's 270, right? So those are the 4 ways of amending the Constitution to, or changing the way states do it so that you don't have the way that we do it now. Now, let's talk about the different powers of the president. And we're going to name this in 3 different ways, okay? The kind of not unconstitutional, but the unofficial powers of the president, the domestic powers of the president, and the foreign policy powers of the president. Let's talk about all 3. A lot of questions tomorrow about the unofficial powers. And let's start off by talking about, I think, the most important transformation, not just of the presidency, but to American government itself. And that is from a kind of a constitutional system to what I think is a more popular system. In the original Madisonian way of looking at things, the people communicated to the Congress, and the Congress essentially told the president what to enforce, what wars to wage, what programs to implement, so forth and so on. The biggest change, I think, to the presidency, and this is a huge unofficial power, is that nowadays the president has the power of what Teddy Roosevelt called the what? The bully pulpit. The president now communicates directly with the people in order to rouse up public opinion, to put pressure onto Congress. Who is the guy who changed it to a rhetorical instead of constitutional office? Woodrow Wilson. Nowadays, a lot of questions on your test tomorrow about this. If the president wants to get his way, he doesn't talk to Harry Reid. He doesn't talk to John Boehner or Kevin McCarthy. He talks to the people. He tries to get them on his side, right? Because according to Woodrow Wilson, the president is the spokesperson of everything, yeah. And so that power of persuasion, making a direct appeal to the public, that is the most important unofficial power of the president. Now, what are some other unofficial ones? Executive privilege. U.S. versus Nixon. This idea that the president has a zone of privacy between himself and his advisors, that he doesn't always have to give up all of his information to Congress or to the public. U.S. versus Nixon said that's true or false? True, but limited, yeah. It has to be somehow related to issues of national security, exactly. So, you have executive privilege, you have the rhetorical presidency. Is the president also, is he a party leader? I don't think I talked about this, but I should have. Is the president the head of his political party? Yes. He is. Yeah, it's not in the Constitution, but he is. No question about it. What's another unofficial power? Nominations is an official power. What? Signing statements is what I was looking for. Very good. The president can sign bills into law, but sometimes he attaches a signing statement saying, I am signing this bill into law, but there are some parts of it I might not enforce. Yeah, here's my understanding of this law, okay, which kind of leads us to the next part of presidential power, which is the official domestic powers. And let's talk about them, right? The most important domestic power of the president is the power to enforce the law, right? Implement the programs. He's in charge of the federal bureaucracy. He has to enforce the law. The president can convene Congress. That's another important power of the president. But a huge one is the power to make nominations, right? There are 2 ways that you get into important offices in D.C. Either you get elected or you get appointed. How do you get appointed? The president nominates you, but then you have to be confirmed by the Senate. By what vote? Simple majority. Simple majority. What is the constitutional phrase that talks about the power of confirmation of the Senate? Advise and consent. Who does he nominate? Judges, ambassadors, secretaries. Okay? So the power of nomination is really important. Also, the president has the power of veto. Yeah. Vetoing is really important. Who is the father of the modern veto? Jackson, yeah. Presidents before Jackson said, you know what? I'm not going to veto a law just because I don't like it. It has to be, in my view, unconstitutional. Nowadays, the president can veto it just simply because he doesn't like it. And so there are 3 kinds of vetoes. The regular veto, the pocket veto, and the line item veto. The regular veto can be overturned, though, with what vote in Congress? 2/3. A pocket veto can only happen in certain times. When is that?
The last 2 days.
in the last 10 days. Very good. If he does nothing in the last 10 days, it has the effect of a veto. Any other time, if the president does nothing, that bill becomes law. Very good. And then finally, you have the line item veto, which is very much like what other power I just talked about. Signing statement, yeah, where I'm going to sign the bill but just veto parts of it. Do most governors have that power? They do. Does President Obama have that power? No. Did Clinton have it for a while? Yes. Why doesn't the president have it today? It's ruled unconstitutional in City of New York versus Clinton. Yeah, so make sure you know those different kinds of veto. Okay? And he also has the power. What is the one unchecked power? The pardoning power. Yeah, all the other ones are somehow shared with Congress. Pardoning power is pretty absolute. What is the most famous one in American history? Ford pardoning Nixon. Very good. So, that's unofficial powers. That's domestic powers. Finally, let's end up with foreign policy power. A lot of questions tomorrow about the president's foreign policy power as commander-in-chief. Now, that is, I think, the most controversial part of the presidency today, and the question is why? The reason it's controversial is because the Founding Fathers deliberately split war-making powers. The president is commander-in-chief. He is in charge of the armed forces. He tells them what to do. But Congress declares the war. Congress funds the war. Congress raises an army. So the question is, there's a big gray area. Can the president send the military to do something without congressional permission? The answer is ambiguous. Now, why did the framers have the Congress declare the war? Because they didn't want to follow the European method, which led to hundreds of years of wars, of who initiated wars. The king, the monarch, the executive of the country. They wanted the popular branch, who was going to fight, die, and fund that war, to be the one that decided if this should be a war we fought, right? So 2 questions about wars. Should we fight them, and how should they be fought? The question of if was deliberately left up to who? To Congress. But, folks, guess what? We've gotten away from letting Congress decide our wars. We used to declare wars in this country. We declared 5 wars in this country, but we haven't done it since World War II. Nowadays, we have these things called resolutions, which kind of have a murky constitutionality to them. Resolutions are simply the Congress saying, we are going to give who the power to decide if and when? The president. A resolution, as Hillary Clinton would tell you, does not necessarily mean that Congress is saying, you have to go fight a war. That would be a declaration. A resolution says, we will let you decide when and if. Vietnam was a resolution. The Gulf War, resolution. Afghanistan, resolution. The next Iraq War, resolution. What about Obama in Libya? It's nothing. Yeah, there's nothing. There's no congressional authority for that. It was done under the UN, but that is not congressional authority. So, because the presidents have gotten so involved in this, okay, because Nixon was bombing Cambodia, what really important law was written in 1973 to try and get some foreign policy power back from the president? The War Powers Act, okay? This is what Schlesinger called the Imperial Presidency. And the War Powers Act said 2 things. 1, if you deploy troops, you have 48 hours to notify Congress. That's not controversial. The really controversial part is the second part, which said you have 60 days to get some form of congressional permission, or else the troops must come home. And that is dubious. Why? Because if the president follows that, and every president thinks that it's unconstitutional, then who's acting as commander-in-chief? Then the Congress is, yeah. They're ordering the troops home. And that's why most presidents will ignore that. Obama has. Bush, the first, said that he would have if he needed to. So understand the War Powers Act is very important for determining timetables, right? And that's why we do that. We don't want a president to be able to go to war as long as he wants to without any congressional permission, right? Also, we'll talk about in class today, the Impoundment Act and the Freedom of Information Act were also ways of trying to get power back from the president during the Nixon years. Okay? Now, as far as multiple choice is concerned, as far as extra credit is concerned, yeah, there are 4 extra credit questions on there. And one of them is a picture ID. It's quite fun. But you have to have the first and the last name is all I'm going to say. It's extra credit. I don't have to tell you anything. Okay, quickly. Shh. Yeah, go ahead. No, I'm not going to give you a hint. It is not a female.
Is he white? Is he white?
Is he white? Yes. Yes, he is. Stop. I knew I had forgotten something. Yeah. Foreign policy powers. I forgot to talk about the other two. In addition to Commander-in-Chief, don't forget. Negotiating treaties. Executive agreements. 6th period. We'll talk about this today. Don't freak out. 6th period. Executive agreements. And finally, nomination can be construed as a foreign policy power depending upon who you actually nominate. Yeah, if it's Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, ambassadors, all that. Okay. Thank you very much. See you guys tomorrow.